It's November the 8th and it's the 118th broadcast of the SDN Cast today in English because we have a guest, Rainer Stropek from Austria, I believe. And your host, Maarten van Stam, that's me, Fanie, Reyders, and Gerald Versluis.
Hello, hello.
Good evening.
Good evening, gentlemen.
Yes. A special guest, Rainer from Austria.
Yes.
Wow.
Is the time also this weird in Austria?
Yes, it is. It's late in the evening.
Yeah, we're still working, you know.
I see.
Right.
Yes.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah. We always start with some news. There is not that much news this week, I think, but let's just go over and see if there's something to discuss in that area. And feel free to just chime in if you have something to say about what we are showing. So, let's move to the desktop. This week was Samsung Developer Conference, and you almost skipped it, but usually there's not much to mention over there. But this time, they had something special over there, and it was the foldable
Ladies and gentlemen,
phone.
I give you the future of mobile display technology, the Infinity Flex Display. Wow.
Yeah, wow.
Today is a big milestone.
Big milestone.
And I'm sure you're all wondering what it looks like in real life and how it works.
Not really.
Well, want to
Well,
know
you
more?
are. Surprise. What's this?
It's finally here. When it's open, it's a tablet offering a big screen experience. Thank you.
I will break this down.
But do you see how they actually sort of put the lights off? You're
Yeah,
not allowed to see the device.
Explains it a couple of minutes later, and the reason for this is because he didn't want to disclose how the actual device is looking, and he just wanted to show the foldable screen.
It's probably just two phones just taped together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Some David Copperfield going on.
Yeah.
No, it's a tablet.
Sticking tape in between, so it's probably two phones together. But there was a lot of rumors around this with Microsoft, with this the so-called new, the Surface phone, and at this time Samsung is basically the first one actually showing a real flat foldable phone. Where there was another one last week, I think, but that's kind of it was not really flat. And this really looks spectacular. And as Fanie said, it's showed basically in the dark, not to show the actual device. And as they say, they are releasing it fairly soon, I believe.
Okay.
Before the holiday season, maybe.
Yeah, okay, this is some kind of use for it, I guess. But other than this, I mean, yeah, what my question is basically why? Why would you want it?
Well, the best thing I think is because you can put it in your pocket, and you have a fairly large screen then.
So I'm losing my phone already. Now I fold it up and lose it even easier.
You drop it once and then you break two phones.
Okay, yeah, well, we'll have to see. It's cool technology.
Yeah, I think the technology is cool, but I think the application will get interesting because how do you do a foldable phone that's not thick? You know,
you have to detect what state your web application or whatever you are showing is in. I think so. You have to maybe on the fly switch between sizes. Yeah.
Or maybe you should just turn off the lights whenever you open it up and close it up, like that was on stage.
Yeah.
There's one downside. It only works in the dark.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, let's leave it for now and see what's going on there. And the other thing was there was a blog post on XAML Islands. This is the new XAML thing.
Mm-hmm.
The Universal Windows platform. There's also a lot of discussion going on what's left of the Universal Windows platform anyway. If there's no mobile platform,
Mm-hmm.
but there were two blog posts at November 2nd, and the other one was basically today, the deep dive part 2, and it's interesting to read. So we put in the link to the.
Oh, was that? Did it say XAML standard up there? Oh no, that's island. Okay, because there was also I saw a couple of tweets about the XAML standard that was also becoming a thing, because you have UWP XAML and WPF XAML and Xamarin XAML, and they all did minor things different. So they were going to unify that. I think they announced it at Build 1 or 2 years ago.
think.
But now the repository has been updated. Like, we're done with XAML standard, and this is not going to happen anymore. So good luck.
They just stopped it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's another thing that keeps developers in the dark, and we also saw the return of the Windows Forms again. So
Yeah. .NET Core 3, right?
maybe they're dropping the XAML Islands and go full Windows Forms.
Maybe the reason why they stopped the XAML standard is because Blazor is becoming a thing.
Ah.
Maybe.
But
Maybe.
we'll learn from. Yeah, we'll find out soon.
Then for Gerald, we have some automation of the workflow with the App Store Connect API that's now available. The Apple developer site.
Yes, it is. It is way past due that they came up with this, because I think Google already has an API for the app stores for a long time, and now they're finally having it for Apple as well. And also, the Apple just released, I think a month ago, the ability to public links, so you can now have a beta of your app and just send a link out in the world, and then people can just download it from that link. Because before you had to collect all the unique IDs for the phones or devices that you want to test on, and then put that in a profile, and then that was the only way. And now anyone can just test whenever they have the link. So they're on a good path here, I think.
But how did they publish the apps previously with like an automated build that releases? Was it even possible?
I don't think so, actually.
So now that it's actually with an API, they can just call this API during release, and it's cool.
Yeah, and of course, I've always used the Xamarin and all that kind of tooling, so I'm not really sure on this part, but yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, competition did it for a long time. They had to do something in that area.
Yep.
And for
they had to do something in that area because the phones obviously is not. Sorry, carry on.
No, and with competition, there's an interesting site that's the Academy. The Academy is difficult for app success for the Android developers. If you start learning, then it's an interesting site to get started. And I thought it was a nice link to share. So let's see what's going on over from there. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, there is not much news anyway, because also December the 4th, I think, is Microsoft plans to have the Connect event again for this year.
Okay. And I think soon after that, the Ignite World Tour starts, right? In Berlin, I think.
I think just before December.
Just
4th,
before. Okay.
Berlin, I think, yes. And yeah, so but that's the old news. That's the news from October. And December 8th is the Connect event that they had last year on October. And And then my guess is that they come with the new .NET standard stuff.
Foldable.NET Standard.
Really, the blog sites from Microsoft are really on hold. The last language blog post was, I think, from November last year, and it's completely on hold. Look up. I heard from C# Fritz that they are updating their blog sites, and maybe they do that the same day. I don't know. For now, there's not much information coming from that area. So, yeah. So let's move over to our guest, Rainer.
Yes. Rainer.
That's how you pronounce it?
Yes, Rainer, that's correct. That's fine.
Before you start, sorry, I saw your presentation at Techorama. You were there. How was it for you? Was it your first time at a Techorama?
No. I have been to multiple Techoramas in Belgium.
Okay.
I think it was my fourth or something like this. I always enjoy coming to Belgium or the Netherlands and presenting in these huge cinemas. It's really awesome. I do a lot of presentation all over the years. But yeah, having such a large screen on your back and have such a large stage and such a large audience is really awesome. I enjoyed my time in the Netherlands, and I hope I can come back next year.
Yeah, absolutely. The weather was also not so bad.
Oh, it was
But
okay.
when I saw your presentation, I was like, yes, you do have to come to the show and just sort of give a presentation like that to show our viewers, what's Blazor all about,
Mhm.
I suppose you have something to show us now and just maybe show some cool things up, maybe some cool things that's coming up on Blazor.
Yeah, of course we can.
What I found interesting is that actually on your YouTube channel, there's this the recording of the Techorama session.
That's right.
And I think that besides the keynote, you're the only recorded,
Oh, yeah.
aren't you?
Yeah, but that was my own thing. They had cameras there to broadcast my picture on the big screen, and I asked the guy whether they can do a recording of the whole stream, and they said, "Oh, of course, no problem. Yeah, we'll put it on a USB stick, and you can put it on YouTube." So it was easy. I didn't have to do very much.
Yeah.
Oh, just ask.
Yeah, exactly. I just ask, and yeah, it worked.
So Gerald, next time remember.
Yeah, damn it. Next
Right.
time I'll be the keynote next year, so
Yeah.
no problem.
Just don't forget to wear red, You won't be the only one.
Also with the this week, I found that I was researching the Blazor thing because you were attending a show. Is that at the toolbox, with Robert Green's toolbox, they have a two-part session on Blazor right now. It's I think this was 4 days ago. Blazor Part 1. I need to share my screen, obviously. And let's see. Can you see my screen? Yeah.
Yep.
And there's a second one. I think that was today. Yes, today. So if you want to know more about it, then that's Rainer going to show today. You get some inside information from that part as well, maybe.
So let's not just jump the gun. Let's have me space. Do you know how to share your screen?
Yes,
Yes, of course I know, but I will share my screen in a few minutes. Let me quickly give a short introduction why I think that Blazor is really a cool thing and why I'm really excited about this technology, and maybe put it in context with other web technologies, because I'm quite sure that many of your listeners and all the people that I work with ask themselves, hey, why do we need just another single page app solution? Because it's hard enough today to choose between the ones that are already on the market. I mean, think of Angular, think of React, think of Vue, and things like that. These frameworks are great. They really fulfill their job. I'm a passionate Angular developer. I do a lot of Angular development. I love TypeScript, and I love to teach Angular. I love to use Angular. So why do we need another single page app framework? That is a question that I get pretty often. And, on the other hand, when I'm not doing Angular work, I work a lot with existing .NET customers. I travel through Europe, and I work with small customers and a lot of mid-size and large enterprises. And many of them, they have a huge investment in .NET. That means they have .NET knowledge, they have existing .NET code, maybe they have translated some bits of these code assets to .NET Standard already, and they are thinking about where should they go. Most of them, believe it or not, are still on WinForms. Maybe they have started some investments in WPF, but they know that this will probably not be the long-term future. So they think about new technologies. And when they think about web, they are in fear. They are in fear of JavaScript. They don't like the JavaScript stuff. They love types. They love .NET. They love their VSTS. They love their NuGet and things like that. And they really hesitate in going into this whole web technology thing. And there, Blazor can really be a game changer. And I'm a strong believer in that. I know that Microsoft would like to convince many non.NET developers to move from other frameworks to Blazor, but I'm not that sure whether this will be that easy. I am not sure if on the short to mid-term, Blazor will have a chance to convert a really passionate Angular guy to move to .NET and Blazor. However, Blazor has the potential to really change the game for .NET teams, because now they can reuse their existing code bases, at least partly. They can reuse a lot of their existing coding skills, and all they have to learn, and that's enough already, is HTML and CSS. And this is why I'm really passionate about this stuff. This opens a way for large and medium enterprises from WPF and WinForms into the browser. And that's a really cool option compared to other possibilities like, for instance, Xamarin. And whenever I have shown Blazor in the last months to enterprises, they got excited. And they all ask the same question. Is it there already? Can we use it now? Because we now need something. So there is kind of urgency behind this project, and I really hope that Microsoft will bring out some pieces of Blazor in the near future, and we will talk about that in a second. So that is really why I think that Blazor is relevant to a certain group in the .NET developer community, but for them, it's really super important.
Just quickly on the technology that Blazor is built on. WASM is now becoming a more and more standard. Can you maybe just elaborate more on what WASM is and what it's actually becoming from where it came from?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that brings us more to the hands-on pieces. And I'm going to show you some hands-on stuff in a second. Blazor is essentially .NET running in the browser. Okay, I know what many of you are thinking now. It is Silverlight again. No, it's not Silverlight again. Blazor is not a plugin. Blazor is built on WebAssembly. Oh, what is WebAssembly? Well, WebAssembly solves a very particular problem. It solves the problem of running very CPU demanding applications like CAD applications, like games and crypto stuff, all things where really a lot of CPU is used, running these things in the browser in a sandbox in a secure way. So the original idea of WASM, of WebAssembly, was take some C++ code, which is really demanding from a performance perspective, compile it to WebAssembly instead of a machine-specific, hardware-specific assembler code, and run it in the browser. And the browser can compile it down to the last mile and take the most out of the hardware that we have. This is where WASM came from. And .NET, the common language runtime, it is written in C and C++. So why not compile the common language runtime onto Blazor and see whether .NET can run on WASM? That was basically the idea. And that was what the Mono team did in 2017. They created a prototype, taking the CLR, compiling it to WASM, and running in the browser. And we had the first Hello World application of .NET running in the browser. Sounds great. So what else do we need? I mean, we already have .NET. Well, you have a problem with WASM. WASM cannot paint pixels on the screen. WASM can just calculate stuff and put it into linear memory. That's all. So all you can do is manipulate a bunch of bits and bytes in memory. That's all. That's not very exciting for many people because you need a user interface. So currently, WASM needs to work closely together with some JavaScript stuff that reads this linear memory and paints some pixels on the screen. So WASM cannot directly manipulate the DOM. You need JavaScript and WASM work together. And this is where Blazor comes in. Blazor is a little bit of .NET with an existing framework. Razor, it's already in the name, plus a client-side JavaScript library that is able to do the painting on the screen. So Blazor is a combination of both. Many people ask me, okay, Blazor, this is killing JavaScript, right? No, it's not. It's a combination of JavaScript and running business logic on top of WebAssembly in C#. That is what Blazor is all about. Maybe in the mid to long-term future, WASM WebAssembly will be capable of directly manipulating the DOM. Could be. In my personal opinion, I think it's very likely that this is going to happen. When this is going to happen, things will change a little bit again, because then the Blazor team can essentially throw out lots of the JavaScript stuff and can run 100% or near 100% on top of WASM. But currently, WASM is the basis for C#. C# is manipulating memory. This memory is read from JavaScript, and JavaScript is manipulating the DOM. This is how Blazor essentially works. And I can show you a few demos in a minute.
So in essence, just to quickly take a step back, you need some kind of JavaScript library to make WASM work. Otherwise, it's not possible, right? So does WASM open up a few APIs that JavaScript can use? Because I suppose it's that wasm.js file or something you would need to run this whole thing.
This is essentially coming from Mono. So the Mono team has already a JavaScript part running in the browser, and this Mono JavaScript is talking to the common language runtime, and you can call JavaScript routines from within WASM, from within C# running in WASM, and you can call, on the other hand, C# routines running in WASM from JavaScript. So it's not enough to have a JavaScript layer on top of WASM. That would be okay if you do C++ development. But if you want to communicate with .NET, you need Mono. Well, many might now ask themselves, why Mono? I mean, what does it make sense? I mean, we have .NET Core and we have .NET Standard. Why does Mono suddenly appear on the screen? Well, that's easy because the Mono teams did it first. So that's essentially the truth. They have the biggest investment in WebAssembly, and so the Blazor team decided to take this flavor of .NET that currently has the strongest WASM support, and that's Mono. Will Blazor always remain on Mono? Well, likely not, or we will see. In essence, it doesn't matter, because we are going to use Blazor, and whether they exchange Mono with .NET Core, it really doesn't matter. But currently, that's the matter of fact, you are using Mono if you run Blazor.
Right, so if I turn off my JavaScript on my browser, it won't even work.
That's correct. Well, maybe some pieces will work, but you will not see something, and that's a pity. Yeah.
Technically, it will work, but it won't show anything because
exactly.
Okay.
What do you think? Should we take a look at it and show? I can show you some code, and we can do some browser debugging in order to see how this WASM and Mono and Razor stuff is all working together.
The floor is yours, sir. You can.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen.
Ooh, there's Gerald.
So can you see Visual Studio here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, very good, very good. So let me hide this guy here. So let's start with a brand new project. Of course, you can do all these things in the command line too, calling .NET new and all this stuff. It's just .NET, nothing special. So if we go to web and select ASP.NET Core web application here, and let's call it Blazor demo, for instance. And then we get on the next screen. And on this screen, we can select what we want to build. And you see, we have the option to select Blazor, Blazor ASP.NET Core hosted. That's essentially ASP.NET backend. We can take this one immediately. And then there is something rather new, which is called Blazor Serverside in ASP.NET Core. That's a very big difference from ASP.NET Core hosted. And I will keep this until the end of my talk because it's the hottest and newest thing from Blazor stuff. I will. This is my cliffhanger to keep you connected until the end of the show. So let's go with that one. Okay. Let's create this project from scratch. I can show you existing projects from my Learn Blazor site in a second, but let's first start with a brand new project. So you see that this stuff is real and you can already try it. So let's switch from IIS Express to command line tooling, hit F5 and start the debugger.
So I see two things actually. I see a server and a client.
That's correct. While this stuff is building, we can take a look at the right-hand side. What you see is the client. This is the Blazor stuff. You see the server. This is just ASP.NET Core. And then you see a shared library. And you know what? When I first saw Blazor, and I saw that you can just take an existing .NET Standard library and you can just link it on the server and on the client, and it works without even recompiling it, I really got excited because I know how many people have large investments in .NET Standard libraries. We will go to the browser in a second. And I mean, that's simply beautiful. Just going into the single page app here, click on add reference and add a reference to a .NET Standard library. And this stuff runs in the client without a plugin based on W3C standards, and it runs on your tablet, on your smartphone, on your desktop, on your Mac, on your Linux PC. That really got me excited because, to be honest, that's really a problem for many .NET shops. They have business logic written in .NET running on the server. Let's think of maybe some form validation stuff. And then they need the same logic on the client in Angular, for instance. What should they do? They can translate the data structures using Swagger and OpenAPI and things like that. But what about the business logic? You have to implement it twice.
Exactly.
And that's not funny. That is a waste of time and money. You don't want to do that. And with Blazor, that's simply gone. Immediately, it's gone. You can use the same code, the same data structures, the same business logic on the server and on the client. And that's pretty exciting, at least if you ask me. So let's take a look at the site here. And this is our brand new Hello World application. And we will directly jump into the debugger here. Go to the Network tab and hit Control F5, reload everything again. And then let's take a look at what's going on here in our network stack. Here we have some not that interesting things. The first thing that I would like to draw your attention to is the MonoWASM thing here. Here is the MonoWASM. This is the Mono Common Language Runtime running on top of WebAssembly. And here is the related JavaScript stuff. This is the JavaScript part of the Mono runtime that makes it possible to communicate between the JavaScript part in the browser and the .NET CLR stuff running inside of WebAssembly. And from there on, from this MonoWASM down there, you see a lot of DLLs. And you see good old friends, don't you? You see an MS Core lib, you see a system core, a system DLL, a system NAT HTTP, and a lot of other things, and you see your own DLL. And to make it very clear, these DLLs are .NET Standard DLLs. They are not specially compiled. They are not some new binary format. It's just DLLs. It's the same DLLs that you can run with .NET Core on any platform.
Okay, so also see at the initiator that all those DLLs are initiated by Blazor itself. It's not from the page.
They are initiated not by Blazor, but they are initiated by the Mono WebAssembly runtime. Essentially, yes. The Mono WASM runtime is running a version of the Common Language runtime on top of WASM, and this WASM version of Mono contains a loader, just like any CLR contains a loader that is capable of loading code from disk, for instance. And in that case, this loader is loading the DLLs through HTTP calls.
Oh.
Blazor is just another .NET DLL. So Blazor is not compiled down to WASM. Will that stay that way? Probably not. Sometimes in the future, maybe in a few months, I don't know when exactly, everything that you see here will probably be capable of compiling it down to a single WASM or a few WASM files, something like packaging up JavaScript code, the thing that we are used to in the web development world. But currently, that's not the case. Currently, the only web assembly that we download is Mono. And everything else is sitting on top of Mono and is not called, it's not compiled into the WASM binary standards. If you take a look at the size, this is now a debug build. If we run a release build, it's much smaller, but still it's significantly in size. So if you compare that with a prod compiled Angular Hello World application, you will see that there is a huge difference in terms of size when you compare a framework like Angular with a framework like Blazor. But to be honest, the customers that I work with, they are mainly in the B2B world. They run their application on rather strong mobile networks, wireless Wi-Fi networks, or even cable connected networks. And it really doesn't make a difference whether the bundle is 250K or 1.5 megabytes, because you can cache the results. You can quite aggressively cache the results. So it's only a matter of downloading time when you run the application for the first time. And for at least many customers I know in the medium and larger size business world, that's not an issue. That's really not an issue. But if you want to enter the world of B2C, maybe in areas of the world where the mobile telephone network and mobile data is not that strong, I am not sure if Blazor is currently the best technology that you could use. You would probably go more into the vanilla JS, Angular Elements stuff where you can really strip down and tree shake the packages to the absolute minimum.
Is that something they're focusing on to bringing the size down, or?
I would not say that they are focusing on, because now they are focusing on stability, on functionality, on getting the bits and pieces out.
Mm-hmm.
They know that it's a problem, and they know that they have a lot of potential there. They know that inside of the linker and things like that, they can also do much better tree shaking, because C# is a typed language. Tree shaking might be even simpler than what is currently possible in the JavaScript space.
Mm-hmm.
We know from Xamarin that optimizing app sizes by shaking or by removing unused parts of .NET and class libraries and things like that is an area where Xamarin is already quite good. So I would say they are aware of it. They know that they can do it. They have proved it. They proved it in the Xamarin world, but it's not a core focus of the Blazor project yet.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
So this is what's going on behind the scene. And then let's take a look. I will clean the network tab here, and I will show you that this is a real single page app. I can move around between the points here, and the only things that are downloaded from the internet is a favorite icon. Okay, let's accept that, and some REST APIs. In this case, it's just fetching a weather forecast data from the server. So we really have a single page app here. It's not Razor running on the server generating HTML. It's really a single page app. Everything is running on the client. There is no HTML server-side generated. Still, we have some buttons. We can click on it, and it's interactive, and all the things that we know and love from from single page apps. So what is the UI? Is it like Silverlight that we have some kind of XAML stuff? The answer is no. The UI, if I go to this button, for instance, it's just HTML. So Blazor is using HTML, it's using CSS, so you can apply all the things that you know and love from HTML and CSS. Do you want to use Sass? That's perfectly fine. Do you want to, I don't know, use some web component stuff? It works because it's just HTML5. Do you want to run this thing in an Electron shell? It works because it's just HTTP, HTML, and CSS. So wherever you can run HTML and WebAssembly, you can run this stuff. What's interesting, if we, for instance, go, what could we do? Let's see. Let's go here.
Does this only work with Razor, or can you just have like a normal HTML page or
No.
even MVC or something?
Blazor is all about Razor. I have to be more exact here. Let's take a look at that. Let me first show you here. Let me show you first one thing. I click on here, break on this guy, and click on this. Break on subtree modification. And let's go to, oh, it's not breaking. Oh, I will show that in a second. You asked me whether this just works with Razor. So let me show you what's going on behind the scenes. Here I have a ready-made, oh, we can do that in the original one here. Let me open here the File Explorer and go to Object and Debug and Net Standard and Pages and open the counter.g.cs here.
Okay, so it's
and
just C
let's
sharp.
take the counter C sharp here. That's the second file that I want to open. Let's put them side by side and get rid of the Solution Explorer here. And then you will see what we have here. On the left-hand side, you see the Razor page, the Blazor page. You see the page directive with the router. Yes, Blazor contains a client-side router, just like Angular does. Here you see a little bit of data binding. That's just an interpolation. You have the current count here, and you see the value is automatically transferred here, and you have change detection and automatically manipulating the DOM and things like that. You also have interactivity. It's kind of event handling on click. We are handling the click event on the DOM, and we are directly linking it to a .NET C# function. That works really nice. But what happens if you compile this page? If you compile this page, what you essentially get is a class. And this class is derived from Blazor component, which is the base class for any kind of component inside of the Blazor system. And the whole stuff here on the left-hand side, the Razor template, is translated into code, as you can see it here. It's translated into code that is building a so-called render tree. That's essentially a memory structure that Blazor builds in the linear memory and hands over to JavaScript. JavaScript can interpret this render tree and execute the commands inside this render tree on the DOM. So this is what's happening. You are taking the Razor page, compiling it to code, and that's what you get. And guess what? Of course, you do not absolutely need Razor to build such code. You can just write it from scratch. And I can show you an example that I have prepared here. Let's, for instance, take that one. This one just generates a tic-tac-toe board. And I was too lazy to write all the necessary table and TR and TD tags. What I did is I manually derived from Blazor component and wrote some code with 2 nested for loops, building the TR and TD things, adding some CSS classes, and with that, we built the whole render tree using code that we wrote without a Razor template. So the answer is yes and no. The only template language that you have is Razor, but you could also write this code by hand or write your own kind of template language and translate it to the Blazor API.
Okay, I see now how the JavaScript or the UI is actually rendered, because now I understand it a bit more, how it's actually compiled into this component that's a class, and it gets like translated into a UI from the JavaScript world.
Yes, exactly. This is how it works. And maybe let's drill down a little bit into, where do we have it? We have event binding, and we have one-way data binding, and we have two-way data binding. Let's take these 3. Let's start with the one-way data binding. Interpolations. Yeah, you can do things like simple interpolations. You can add if statements. It's like a star ng if in Angular, for instance. You can do some bindings on Boolean properties like hidden. So Blazor will conditionally add or remove the hidden attribute to hide or show some parts in the DOM. You can apply such data bindings inside of style and class components, as you can see it here. So you can conditionally apply some coloring or add and remove some styles, as you can see it here. And of course, you can also add code like for each and so on. It's similar to Angular's ng for loop. That's essentially what you can do with one-day data bindings. Well, it's not data binding, it's just interpolation. But this is the simple stuff. It's getting more interesting if we take a look at the event binding mechanism, because what you see here is handling, for instance, a button click. You can do that directly with the C# function. You can add some Lambda methods, things like that, and that's really pretty awesome. It also supports the async programming model. So if you have some async mechanisms that return task and use async await and things like that, it just works. It just works like a charm. If we take a look at the two-way binding, you will find a new attribute here. It's called bind, and this bind attribute is triggering two-way binding. So you can enter some text here, name for instance, and this is bound, if we scroll down a little bit, to our name property that you see here. So doing two-way binding is pretty simple, and you can also apply some formatting if you bind non-string data, like for instance in that case, if you want to bind a datetime value.
Is the bind just a tag helper?
It's a little bit special. No, it's a Blazor stuff. It's not just a tag helper that you maybe know from ASP.NET Core. Bind is really something very special, and it's part of the Blazor runtime.
Okay.
Down here, you also see that the whole data binding mechanism supports all the nice things from C# that you know and love. For instance, enumerations. In that case, I'm building a select box from options that come from an enum, as you can see it here. So you can see it's pretty amazing what Blazor already knows in terms of data binding in both directions, one-way, two-way, and event binding stuff. The next question that I always get is, okay, I see that, but what about change detection? I mean, we know that Angular does a pretty awesome job in change detection, and it gives you a lot of control for performance optimizations and so on. Blazor works similarly, but it does not copy the data somehow magically in the background and then it compares the data to find out the differences and things like that. This is not the strategy that Blazor is using. Blazor is also not relying on iNotify property change or things like that. Blazor does some change detection mechanisms immediately whenever some certain events happen. So if you interact with the UI, doing a button click, things like that, if a web request finishes and things like that, then Blazor is auto-detecting changes because it knows the data binding expressions, and it can verify what has changed and what hasn't changed. Essentially, it's rendering the whole tree and then doing a diff on the tree and detect the changes in the rendered tree and sends some render batches from the wasn't part to the JavaScript part, and this JavaScript part is then manipulating the DOM. But you have full control about this mechanism, because if you want, for instance, here I've written some code. If you use some mechanism in C# that Blazor doesn't recognize as this could be a possible change in the data, for instance, a timer, you have the possibility to call a very special method, which is called state has changed. If you do that, you are triggering the change detection mechanism manually, but you're only triggering it for this very special component. So it's not doing an entire change detection mechanism. It's just detecting and verifying the change detection on this very special component. So this is how change detection essentially works in Blazor, and yeah, it works pretty well. We will see when this stuff gets available and when applications get larger, we will see whether some tweaking and performance optimization is necessary. But now this is how it works.
Okay, just quickly, on the screen now, there's the manual refresh child element. So that probably maps to some kind of partial view or something, right? So
Yeah, you're right. Let me show you that. Let me see. Here is the parent. What I did here in this example, I created a parent control, and here you see that you can nest these controls. So the manual refresh child is not an HTML element, of course, but it maps to the name of another component. If you go here, you see here we have the manual refresh child. Please note that the manual refresh child does not have a page directive at the beginning of the page because it's not used in the router. It's just a component that you can embed in another component, which is then part of the router, as you can see here. Additionally, you have layouting mechanisms, as you can see here. In that case, the main layout, it's kind of master page if you want. And here you can inherit from a class which is called Blazor layout component. So you can build multiple of these layouts. And here you have a placeholder like a router outlet, if you want, in Angular. And here, Blazor will inject the body, which reflects the content of the current route of the client-side router.
Cool.
Yeah, that already works. Before we go a little bit more into the router, let me show you some additional pretty awesome stuff. As you can see here, I'm using the timer. I don't have to call some JavaScript set timeout stuff. I really can use the system threading namespace to do some timers and intervals and things like that. The whole task-based programming stuff, it just works. So you can do async, await, and so on. Many people, I know what's in the head of many people listening to this webcast now. Well, does that mean we get multi-threading in the browser using C# and Blazor? And the answer is no, you don't. It just don't works. It's not multi-threading. It's async programming, like in JavaScript. So yes, we have async. Yes, we have async await. Yes, we can execute multiple HTTP requests at the same time. That works. I mean, that works in JavaScript too. But we cannot do CPU-bound parallel processing in .NET running on top of WASM inside the browser.
Now, the classes you use, does it need to be in .NET Standard, or can it be like full framework 4.2 or 4.5 or 4.6?
It's .NET Standard plus the Blazor library.
Okay, so .NET Standard needs to be there. At least you need to have a .NET Standard library to make it work, right? So it needs to be .NET Standard.
Yes, it needs to be .NET Standard, and we can take a look at this one here, and you will see that this is currently a .NET Standard 2.0 library, and this is referenced from the server side and the client side. So, but don't get me wrong, you do not need to install some kind of .NET Core or any kind of runtime environment on the target machine.
Yeah, because
it brings
it's in a
everything it needs with it.
Yes. Okay.
Related to classes, I want to show you another very interesting thing here. I have written an example page here, the fetch data HTML, and I'm going to open it for you. What you see here, I want to draw your attention on line 3. You see, first, Blazor has a dependency injection mechanism. So what you can do on the client side is, if you go in startup, you have a configure services method. Isn't that awesome? That's just like ASP.NET Core. You have a configure method, you have a configure services method, and you have an iService collection, and you can add single uns, you can add scoped, and all this. And they work. And with the @inject statement here, you can access the dependency injection mechanism. In that case, we are asking for a standard service, the HTTP client service. And this is really the system.net.http.http client class that you know from .NET Standard and .NET Core. And that one is important. If you have existing code in a .NET Standard library that is accessing, for instance, some backend web APIs, and you want to reuse this code, you can. because Blazor supports HTTP client. What it does behind the scenes is it's setting up an instance of HTTP client that is behind the scenes wired up with your browser's network stack. So essentially, if you do an HTTP client get, I have it, I think, down there. Yeah, here you have it. If you do an HTTP get, it's again talking to JavaScript. JavaScript is doing an XML HTTP request. I think it's using the fetch API of the browser, if I can remember that correctly on the top of my head. And then the browser receives the result. The result is packaged up from JavaScript. It's going into WASM. WASM is deserializing this stuff and giving it back to you in a .NET data structure. So the point is, if you have some C# code and .NET code, it just works. It just works. Use the HTTP client, and Blazor and the JavaScript stuff is doing the heavy lifting for you behind the scenes.
Cool.
So two things I actually want to ask. The first thing is about, you injecting stuff. Is that the same, using the same instance, like a singleton instance, or not recreating sockets on the client side? Because people think, oh, HTTP client, you should not, you should be careful if you inject that, because
yes,
instances.
You get one.
So only one.
Yep.
Because that's managed on the JavaScript side or on the client side, right? So on the handler. Another question is, if I do not want to use HTTP client, I want to use something like Refit. Is that possible?
You cannot directly access any kind of network API from within Blazor. You have to go through JavaScript. So the answer to your question is yes, if you build your own JavaScript bridge.
Okay.
But out of the box, the answer is no. So if you think of directly using some lower level network API, it just doesn't work, because that's not a limitation of Blazor. It's a limitation of the browser. The browser doesn't give you access to the networking stack.
I mean more like something like Refit, that wrapper, that client wrapper library. Are you familiar with that?
No, I have to admit.
Okay,
I think it does work, Fanie. I think because it does its magic compile time. So there's what it does, Rainer, is you define the REST calls that you want to do in an interface, and then with the attributes you can say, okay, this has to be a get or a post method, and you don't have to implement all the calls yourself. It just generates the codes to your REST API by taking apart the interface and the attributes you put above it.
If you can make it work with this instance of HTTP client, then it should be fine.
Yeah,
it provides that instance. Or no, it does not provide that instance. It uses that instance.
Yeah.
It uses that instance underlyingly. So that instance gets injected.
Important. Yeah. Exactly, that's important. It has to get this instance by using the Blazor dependency injection mechanism.
Okay.
Behind the scenes, that will become a property on the class with an attribute. So dependency injection is basically relying on attributes. I can show you that on my site. Let's give me a second. If we go to, where is it? Dependency injection. So this is how you would add transients and scoped and singletons and so on. And here you have the system services. What you get is an URI helper, and you will get the HTTP client, which is wired up, as I said, with JavaScript in the background. And here you see some additional things. If you have, for instance, some additional services and you need access to the HTTP client in these services, in that case, I implement a repository that needs the HTTP client, then you can use constructor injection and you will get it from there.
Yeah, so that means that Refit will work, because Refit works in the same way.
Yeah.
When it generates your code, it has a constructor with HTTP client. That makes it.
Then it should work. Then it should be just fine.
Where can I get this code, though? Are you going to put up a link for us to?
Yeah, of course. I can give you this link immediately or later on.
Maybe later on. That's fine.
Okay, fine. I would like to show you one final thing, and then we can see whether we have additional questions, because this thing is really, I think, very important. This is the wrong one. I want to have that one. That is the correct one. So let me show you that one. And the second one is where is it?
Martin, you are taking a good look at the questions, eh? Or if the people are asking anything?
Sure.
It's just making sure.
Everyone flabbergasted.
Okay, I wanted to show you interop, because if we talk about HTML and JavaScript, especially now, only a few libraries for Blazor are available. To be honest, it will take quite a while until the large, or let's say relevant parts of the JavaScript universe are available as out-of-the-box native Blazor libraries. There are a few, but still the JavaScript universe is huge. And you probably, if you build a real-world application, which is not trivial, you want to access some existing JavaScript stuff that either you have written or that you have bought or downloaded from NPM or wherever. So JavaScript interop is a crucial thing, in my personal opinion. And this demo shows you how JavaScript interop works. Let's take a look at both ways. Here you see I add a global method which is called say. It's async. Please note the JavaScript async stuff here. And yeah, this is just a method. If we want to call this method from within, my cat says hello. Hello.
Hi.
She's just typing code. I'm sorry. Okay, let me undo that. So this was my cat doing live coding. So I think she will not take away my job, but yeah, now it works again. Yeah, where were we? Yeah, we were here. So
Cats write the best code.
here it is. If we want to call a JavaScript method from within C#, we can just call invoke async, as you can see here, and we say which method do we want to call and what are the parameters. The parameters could be just a string, but it also can be a C# object, which will then, if we take a look, be just translated into a JavaScript object on the JavaScript side. If we want to do it on the other way around, we can call invoke method async on a class which is called .NET. We can tell the system what is the namespace, what is the class, what is the method name, and what is the what are the parameters, and it will do the necessary call from JavaScript to C# and the other way around.
Cool.
So this works pretty well. And what I've done here in this example, I wanted to take it one step further, and I wanted to see whether a more powerful JavaScript library like Kendo, the Kendo UI library and from Progress Telerik, whether this would work with Blazor. And it works. It works perfectly fine. What you see here is a combination of jQuery, of the Kendo autocomplete combo box in that case, and handling the select method by doing a .NET invoke method call. So here we have a nice integration from the Kendo autocomplete with Blazor and C# code. So
This
yeah,
amazing.
Cool. Yeah.
It reminds me of Edge.js, actually.
Yeah, well, partly, but Edge.js works pretty differently because Edge.js works on the server side, not on the client side. But yeah, if you take a look at the code, it's somehow similar. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Let me show you the last bit that I wanted to save for last, because there is a new development in the Blazor world. So, and that's this one. Blazor server-side in ASP.NET Core. Let's click OK and create the application, and then let's take a look how it differs from the template that we have used before.
So it's a single page application on the server side.
This is a single page application on the server side, if you want to put it that way. So let's build this guy and let's take a look at the server-side startup. If we take a look at the server-side startup, we will see that in this case, it doesn't say use Blazor, it says use server-side Blazor. What's going on here? And if we take a look at the startup code, the program CS code, we will see that we use some Blazor startup and we have the WebAssembly code. It looks pretty similar. So the client side looks pretty identical to what we had before, but the server side, it differs just in 1 or 2 lines of code. So let's try this guy and debug it, and then let's talk about what's going on behind the scenes here. So let's trigger the debugger again, and yeah, this is again our Hello World application. I can click on it, it just works identically to the one before, but now we will reload this guy. Please take a close look on the right-hand side. Do you see any kind of WASM, DLL stuff or whatever?
That's weird. No.
Yeah, you can't because there isn't anyone. So this version of Blazor, it's not relying on WASM anymore. Instead, we have something pretty interesting. We have a WebSocket.
Ah, okay.
So if we go to WebSocket and open this, open this guy and go to frames here, and if I click on it, you see what's going on behind the scenes. So this server-side single-page app works the following way. You are now essentially running .NET on the server. You're running ASP.NET. You do not have Mono anymore. You have .NET Core, and your code runs on the server side, and it communicates with the client through WebSockets.
But it's still a single-page application, right?
It's a single page application with a stateful server where the stateful server is connected with the client through a WebSocket connection, and you do not have to do the wiring your own. Well, the step into that direction wasn't that big because I told you that WASM is already not directly connected to the DOM. Everything that WASM does has to be translated to linear memory. This linear memory is then interpreted by JavaScript and painted on the screen. So it's kind of obvious to rip out the whole Blazor stuff, remove the WASM part, move the Blazor sandbox if you want to the server, and do a little bit of extra code to serialize and deserialize the render trees and transmit it via WebSockets. And voila, you have server-side Blazor.
That is amazing. And what happens now if you turn off your JavaScript?
If I turn off my JavaScript, it doesn't work.
It won't still work.
No, it won't.
Okay, because?
Because still you have the Blazor JavaScript part.
I see. Okay.
You need the JavaScript to receive the WebSocket messages. The WebSocket messages contain the render tree, and the render tree has to be painted on the screen. And this is the job of JavaScript.
Okay, so you still need a client that supports WASM then?
Absolutely. You need the Blazor client.
Okay.
You'd still need the Blazor client. That's the important thing here. But the magic that this, or the possibility that this opens is it opens much earlier release of parts of the Blazor functionality, because the stuff that you see here doesn't rely on preview technology. We do not have WASM here, which is preview. We do not have Mono here. Mono on top of WASM is still preview. What we have is .NET Core. It's released. What we have is JavaScript on the client. This is released. We have WebSockets. This is released. So we have the underpinnings of the whole Blazor server-side stuff is already there. And therefore, Microsoft decided, or they have announced, that they plan to release this version of Blazor already in the time frame of .NET 3.0.
Cool. And you can simply switch then to the client-side Blazor?
At least this is the promise. Currently, you can. If you ask me personally, now that's absolutely not any kind of opinion from the Blazor team or official or whatever. That's just me talking. I really hope that it will stay on par so that you can easily switch from client to server side. And I really hope that this will not mean some kind of Blazor drifting apart into a kind of server-side world and client-side world, which is partly incompatible. we will see what time brings. Currently, the plan is it's similar or identical. Switch is simple, and I hope that it will stay the same. There are, of course, no guarantees in the web world. Yeah.
Cool.
I just want to understand something correctly. Maybe you could just take a step back. Just go to your sources again. Is it sources or that? To the browser. When
you wanted to see that one?
If you go back to the browser where you
the browser. Okay.
Where you load all your resources. Is it?
You mean that one and that one?
Yes, exactly. Let me just see what's going on here. So there's JSON.
It's loading the JavaScript part of Blazor. What you see here.
Yes.
And the Blazor JavaScript is then opening the WebSocket connection to the .NET Core stuff, which is running in ASP.NET Core on the server.
So, but technically, you don't need a client that supports WebAssembly.
That's correct.
Okay.
The .NET Core stuff, which is running in ASP.NET Core on the server. Yeah.
So, but technically,
now I can hear myself talking.
Oops.
I can also hear myself talking. Gerald, don't be naughty.
Sorry.
Okay, so the difference between the server side and the client side is that on the client side you need, or the client side version, you need a browser that knows WASM and that supports WASM, and it actually downloads the whole thing and it runs locally.
Yep.
The server side thing, you actually don't need WASM, you just need minimal support, or you just need support a browser for WebSockets and a server side connection, and that's it, and it'll work.
Exactly. That's correct. And from a practical perspective, there is another huge difference. That version, you have a debugger, because debugging capabilities of Blazor and also WebAssembly is currently very, very, very limited in the client-side world. So yes, you can set a breakpoint. Yes, you will see your C# code in the sources window. But you have very limited functionality in terms of stepping through the code, doing watch expressions and things like that, because Visual Studio has to become a kind of debug server for the Chrome browser. And that's just at a very, very early preview stage. But if you run it in that way, your C# code is executed on the server side in .NET Core. And that means you have a debugger, the same debugger that you know from ASP.NET Core.
That's very cool.
So you asked me about further resources and samples and so on. Of course, the main source for any kind of documentation is the official Blazor documentation that you see here. You have the chapters or the information about the components, and you can see some layout stuff. I was lucky enough to provide already some documentation for the official Blazor documentation here.
Cool.
You see some dependency injection, and you see some routing stuff and some JavaScript interop and things like that. This is the kind of current state of the official documentation. And as always with open source projects, the team is looking for contributions. If you want to write some documentation, feel free to suggest topics or enhance topics and send them pull requests. They are more than happy to take them and to publish them. Some months ago, when Blazor was in such an early state that there was absolutely no documentation at all, I started this little side project. It's called learnblazor.com. It was kind of the first community documentation that was on the web before you had to read the source code. I started that, and I published samples, and I tried to keep it up to date more or less. So you can read some additional things here. Many of the information that you see here, you can also find it now today on the official documentation, but there is still some additional information here. And if you go to GitHub, which is the backend for this nice little Learn Blazor stuff.
It isn't built in Blazor.
Pardon?
It's
not built. No, it's built with Hugo and Markdown stuff. And here you find a folder which is called samples. And here you see all my samples that I used at Techorama and that I showed you today. And it contains a lot of. It's my personal playground for Blazor, and you can find all the things that I try here and play with and download it and do whatever you want with it. It's all MIT licensed, so feel free to use it, redeliver it, play with it.
That is cool. Just want to take a mental picture about this stuff because this is awesome. I think we can put this link to this repo on the show notes, right, Martin?
Oh, you can just publish this one, and you will always have the edit this page link on the right-hand side, and people will find the repository from there. Yep.
Cool.
Yes, I actually had the websites already up in my browser to show, but you already did that for me. There was also a note with Daniel Roth in the comments, also on the Blazor.net community site. I should say the Blazor.net site. There's the submenu community, and there you can find many more of the JavaScript interrupt libraries for Blazor, and I'll put this in the show notes as well. So it's a great session, I should say, and very happy to have you on the show.
Daniel also said being able to switch from server side to client side is absolutely a goal from the Blazor team, as long as you write your app with the appropriate abstractions.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, well, so we are way above the hour, so to continue and finalize the show today, and next week with let's see, the 15th of November we'll be back again with the next episode, and well, happy to have you on the show, and
it was really cool.
See you all next time.
Rainer, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure showing you some Blazor stuff.